Some coaches say that lifting will make it more difficult for their athletes to make weight. Other coaches and athletes believe that lifting will hurt their performance on the mat. What's right, what's wrong? In today's video, I'm gonna break down everything that you need to know about weightlifting for combat athletes. Stay tuned. What's going on? Coach Adam here. Welcome to another Fight Science video. If you're new to the channel, our mission is Fight Science Made Simple. We're breaking down everything from strength and conditioning to recovery, nutrition, weight management for combat athletes. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything that we're dropping on the channel. And if you're excited for the video, if you're digging the video, or you're just feeling generous because it helps us out a lot, hit the like button, show some love, show some support so we can help more fighters. I'm fired up to be talking about today's topic. We're talking about weightlifting for combat athletes. Should combat athletes lift weights? I really see two camps in the combat sport world. The camp of coaches and athletes that are pretty old school, that think that lifting will slow their athletes down, make them injured, hurt their fight performance. And the other camp of combat athletes that understand that lifting is important, but don't understand how to lift for their sport. So they do bodybuilding splits, or they lift like a power lifter, or a lot of fighters nowadays do CrossFit, which we'll need a whole other video about why CrossFit is not the right fit for combat athletes. So the short and sweet answer, yes, combat athletes should be lifting weights. Doesn't matter if you're an MMA fighter, a boxer, a grappler, a jiu-jitsu practitioner, a wrestler, judo, karate. It doesn't matter what sport you train, you should be lifting weights in some shape or form. And the reason combat athletes should be lifting weights, first and foremost, is injury prevention. When we're strong, when we can produce and absorb force, when our tendons and our ligaments and our joints are resilient, we're much less likely to get hurt in our sports, which everybody wants to train for a long time, compete for a long time without getting hurt. Second reason we should lift is because of power. When we're able to produce more force, we can then speed that up and get more powerful with our strikes or our takedowns or our transitions or our submission. The third reason we should lift is because of strength. We want to be able to control, manhandle people, throw them around, and just bully people in the ring. And finally, we look good. Everybody wants to look a little bit better. Lifting weights is going to give us that sick look of a fighter, and it's intimidating for the person in front of us, and it boosts our confidence. So now you know, as a combat athlete, why you should lift. Now it's important that you understand how to lift as a combat athlete. Like I said before, I see a lot of fighters do bodybuilding splits or lift like a power lifter, or they do CrossFit. And at the end of the day, you're not a CrossFit athlete, you're not a bodybuilder, and you're not a power lifter. So lifting like those sports is only going to do more harm than good. It could increase your chances of getting injured. It's not specific for your sport, and it could throw off some of your performance that you're seeing on the mat. The reason that there are coaches against lifting for combat athletes is because their experience with lifting is bodybuilding, CrossFit, and powerlifting. So they've seen fighters lift in a non-specific way. They've seen their fighters get slow or injured or have their performance affected, and they make the connection, fighters shouldn't lift. When in reality, combat athletes need to lift like combat athletes. So what exactly does that mean? Anytime that we write a lifting program for any of our combat athletes, there are four major keys that we consider when writing these programs. Let me share them with you. The first big consideration that we take into account when writing a lifting plan for any of our combat athletes is the sport that they practice. A BJJ athlete is going to lift a little bit differently than a boxer. They're going to lift a little bit differently than an MMA athlete. The reason for this is we're working different energy systems. We're using different muscle groups in different ways, and our competitions have different durations, different lengths, and different goals. We also see different types of injuries from sport to sport, so we have to make sure that we address those injuries appropriately. Depending on the sport that you practice, it's going to impact a couple different factors, like the reps and sets and weights that we use, what we focus on energy system wise, muscular wise, and also some of the movements that we select. For example, let's look at a squat, right? We want to have some kind of squat in all of our combat sports, but the squat variation we choose might vary from sport to sport. For example, in jiu-jitsu, we have a lot of squeezing for submissions. We call these isometric movements. So let's say we're a triangle player and we want to have a really strong figure four and be able to squeeze isometrically with our legs for a long time. Something like an isometric hack squat could be really beneficial. Maybe we're an MMA athlete and we're in this position here a lot. Maybe we're wrestling, maybe we're boxing. A Zercher squat could be a really strong option. Or even a boxer, right? We are, for the most part, in a staggered stance. One foot's in front of the other one's back behind us off to an angle. So something like a staggered stance trap bar deadlift could be a good variation for our lower body strength. These are three ways that we can work a similar movement pattern, but also make it specific for the sport that we practice. So sport specificity is extremely important when it comes to creating a lifting plan for any combat sport. The second key factor that comes into play when designing a lifting program for combat athletes is the phase of the fight cycle that they're in. Most fighters have no idea what the phases of the fight cycle are, and this is a staple in every single program that we create for all of the combat athletes on our coaching system. The phases of the fight cycle, they're pretty simple. The first phase of the fight cycle is the off camp. This is where we have no fights booked. We can really use this time to build new athletic qualities like strength endurance or hypertrophy, which is just muscle growth, or total strength. Then we have the pre-camp. This is anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks out from a fight. We can start to get a little bit more specific in the lifting that we're doing. From here, we like to focus on speed strength. We like to dabble in power development a little bit and just get a little bit more explosive in the weight room. One of the final phases and a very important phase of the fight cycle is the camp phase. 8 weeks out from the fight, we're peaking for our fight. Everything that we do in this phase is as specific to our competition as possible. So we're really focusing on speed, power, neural drive coming from our nervous system, all things that are going to make us snappy and explosive and devastating when we step into the ring. When we create our programs for our athletes, we decide what phase of the fight cycle that they're in. We know what sport that they're performing. Then we use this chart right here, it's going to be right there, to dictate the reps, the sets, and the intensity that we're going to use depending on the quality that we're trying to build. For example, I have a boxer that's in the off camp. We're trying to build some muscular endurance. We're most likely going to do 1 to 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps. We're probably going to rest for 30 to 60 seconds between our sets, and the intensity or the weight that we're going to be using is going to leave us anywhere from 1 to 3 reps in reserve. On the other side of things, let's say we're in camp and we're trying to get more powerful, then most likely I'm going to do anywhere from 2 to 6 sets of 1 to 7 reps. We're going to rest from anywhere to 120 to 300 seconds. We're going to get a lot of rest in there, 2 to 3 minutes. And we want to have anywhere from 1 to 4 reps in reserve when we're selecting weight on the bar. And so this chart's a really great tool to help us determine our reps, our sets, our rest, and our weights, depending on the quality that we're trying to improve at any given phase of the fight cycle. The third consideration that we take into account when designing a lifting program for our combat athletes are the strengths and the weaknesses of each and every athlete. Look, the reality is we do not have a lot of time in combat sports. The sport puts a lot of demand and a lot of stress on each and every athlete that participates, that competes in these different sports. Because of that, it's really important that we know where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. From there, we can maintain our strengths and we can use our energy, especially in the off camp, to turn our weaknesses into strengths. For example, let's say I have a female athlete that's pretty strong in their legs, but lacks upper body strength. I'm probably going to spend some more time in the off camp building their upper body strength, doing some heavy pressing, doing some heavy pulling, and just maintaining their lower body strength. So when we do get them into the ring, they feel more confident. Maybe they're a grappler. They feel more confident framing up, keeping someone away from them, or maybe they're a boxer. They just feel stronger in their ability to dig in their punches a little bit and also prevent some shoulder, elbow, rotator cuff injuries. If I have a lighter athlete, maybe I have a flyweight, and they just lack overall strength. Maybe they just have a lot of cardio. They can go for days and days and days, but they don't have a lot of power on their strikes like we see in lower weight classes. Now we can use this time to focus a lot more on overall strength development in the off camp, and then transition into some really devastating power so they can stand out in their weight class. So it's important to understand where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. From there, we can craft the perfect program around it that's going to be unique for you and for your sport. And our fourth and final consideration that we take into account when designing a lifting program for combat athletes is an athlete's injury history. Injuries are very common in any sport, but especially in combat sports. And as a strength and conditioning coach, my number one job before anything else is to reduce the injuries that my athletes experience. Some really common injuries in all combat sports are things like neck and shoulder and elbow and knee and rib. Very common, right? In jiu-jitsu, our joints are getting put in submissions and in locks and getting put under stress all the time. In striking sports, we're getting hit, we're taking impact. And MMA, it's so dynamic, we could end up in any position at any time and we could be compromised and potentially get injured. This is why properly lifting and strength training for your sport is so important to prevent future injuries. We also have to know the injuries that an individual athlete has struggled with. So for example, if I have an athlete with a history of knee injuries, we're probably going to spend a lot of time working on their hamstring and glute strength to make sure that their knees don't get injured more than they already have been. On the other side of things, if I have an athlete that's struggling with a lot of rotator cuff injuries, then we're going to spend a lot of time working on their back muscles, a lot of rowing, a lot of pulling, a lot of external rotation to make sure that the integrity of the joint is stable so that we can reduce the injuries that they're struggling with. So there you have it. I really hope that this video cleared up some of the confusion around lifting for combat sports. Every single combat athlete should lift weights in some capacity, but like anything, if we do something random, the results that we're going to get are also going to be random. So it's really important that our lifting is specific for the sport that we practice, specific towards the phase of the fight cycle that we're in and the quality that we're trying to improve, specific to the strengths and weaknesses of each individual athlete, as well as taking into account the injuries of those athletes. If you're able to create a strength and lifting program around those four components and have it change and be dynamic like the sport that you practice, then you're gonna find yourself ahead of a lot of athletes in any combat sport. You're gonna be stronger, you're gonna be more powerful, you're gonna be less injured, you're gonna have a larger foundation to build your skill work on, which at the end of the day, that's what we all love doing. We all love training skill, but if we're not strong enough, then we're gonna get injured, we're gonna be off of the mat, and we're not gonna be able to have a long, healthy, and successful career. But that's all I got for today's video. Like always, we'll be here every other Monday dropping new videos on strength, conditioning, nutrition, and weight management. If there are any topics that you want me to talk about, to cover, to teach you here on the channel, just let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, peace.